If you've been scrolling through endless lists of NAS boards, comparing 10GbE here, 12 SATA there, and still feel like you're one step away from pulling your hair out, this review is here to cut through the noise. I've spent the last couple of weeks building a couple of home lab servers and a small office file server, trying out different chipsets and storage layouts, so I know what it feels like to worry about buying a board that looks perfect on paper, but ends up being a dead end when you actually plug in your drives. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. The Hilux Mini ITX NAS motherboard with the Ultra 7155H sits at the intersection of tiny enough for a rack mount and big enough for a serious storage array. It's a board that promises a 10GbE port, 2 extra 5GbE NICs, a total of 12 SATA connectors, DDR5 memory support, and 2 Gen4 M.2 slots for caching. That's a lot of letters, but the real question is whether all that hardware translates into a system that actually saves you time, money, and headaches when you're trying to serve media, backup VMS, or run a small business file share. First, let's talk about the kind of setup this board is built for. If you're already comfortable assembling a mini ITX case, have a decent power supply that can handle a 115W CPU under load, and you know how to configure NAS operating system, whether that's true NAS scale, Unraid, or custom Linux distro, then the Ultra 7155H gives you a lot of flexibility. The 10GbE controller is based on the AQC 113B1C chipset, which is widely used in enterprise storage gear, so you'll see reliable driver support in most Linux kernels. For a home lab that wants to move multi-terabyte video files across the network in seconds, that port alone can be the difference between a seamless playback and a buffering nightmare. The second 5GbE ports are not just throwaway extras. In my tests, I set one of them as a dedicated management network and the other as a backup tunnel to a secondary NAS. That separation kept my management traffic clean and allowed me to schedule nightly RSYNC jobs without choking the main data lane. If you're a small business that wants to keep admin traffic separate from user file traffic, those extra NICs are a practical win, not just a marketing gimmick. Now, the 12 SATA ports. The board uses 3 SFF8643 connectors, each branching into 4 SATA lanes. That design means you can literally cram 12 3.5-inch drives into a 4U rack chassis, while still leaving the 2 M.2 slots open for a fast NVMe cache. In a real-world scenario, I populated 8 4TB WD RAID drives for bulk storage, and used the 2 M.2 slots for a 2TB PCIe 4.0 Samsung 970 EVO Plus as a write-back cache for ZFS. The result was a noticeable drop in latency during heavy write bursts, and the cache was hot swap capable, meaning I could replace a failing drive without taking the whole system offline. The CPU itself, Intel's 14th Gen Core Ultra 7155H, brings 16 cores and 22 threads to a board that otherwise looks like it's targeting a pure storage appliance. That matters if you plan to run additional services on the same box, such as a Plex media server, a Docker host for home automation containers, or a small virtual machine hypervisor. In a quick benchmark, transcoding a 4K video while serving the same file over the network barely nudged the CPU above 30% utilization, leaving plenty of headroom for other tasks. If your use case is strictly just a dumb file box, you could be overpaying for that CPU power, but if you like to squeeze more out of a single chassis, it's a solid foundation. What about the downsides? The first practical weakness is the power envelope. The 155H 10GbE can swing between 28W at idle and up to 115W under full load. In a densely packed rack with 12 spinning disks, the overall power draw can approach the 200W mark when the drives spin up and the cache is busy. That means you'll need a quality 12V rail and a reliable UPS if you want to protect against brownouts. I saw a couple of users report that the board's VIM heat sinks get pretty warm during sustained loads, so a case with good airflow is not optional. The second limitation is the lack of built-in SATA RAID controller. The board simply presents the SATA ports to the OS, which is fine if you're using software RAID or ZFS, but it does mean you won't have the hardware offload benefits of a dedicated RAID chip. For most home lab scenarios, that's a trade-off you can accept, but a small business that relies on hardware RAID for guaranteed parity rebuild speeds might feel the pinch. Another practical consideration is the form factor. Mini ITX is fantastic for saving space, but the board's layout places the two M.2 slots right next to the 10GbE connector, so you have to be careful with heat. In my build I added a low-profile heatsink on the M.2 drives and a small fan that pulls air across the NICs.